What's the most common mistake that motorcyclists make when they're heading out on a trip? Let's make sure it doesn't happen to you. So let's talk about pre-trip planning. Are you planning a long-distance motorcycle adventure for this spring or summer like I am? Well, that's a great decision because a long-distance motorcycle adventure can be a life-changing experience, especially if it's your first one. What I love best about a motorcycle adventure is the unexpected. You may have heard the expression, adventure begins when things go wrong. This has been true on every motorcycle adventure I've ever been on. The unexpected and the challenge of fixing situations that do go wrong is part of the fun. But to avoid things going wrong throughout your adventure, or worse, ending it early, a good pre-trip plan is not only useful, but it can get you excited for your upcoming motorcycle adventure. I'm planning a 4-week adventure to the Southwest, so I thought it'd be helpful to show you my approach to pre-trip planning. There are a lot of different ways to plan your adventure. That's the beauty of this. Having choices makes life a lot more fun. What I'll go through today is my way of doing this. This is a 30,000 foot view of this process. If I don't cover something here, or if you have more questions, hit me up in the comments or on Instagram. You may have already done this first step. It's an important one. That's because it will impact the whole of your adventure, from what type of bike you'll be riding to where you'll be riding. And this is plan what type of motorcycle adventure you want. 100% on-road, 100% off-road, or a combination of the two. Some of you more experienced riders may be saying, well, duh, Joe, that's one of those unskippable steps. You don't need to highlight. If you're saying that as an experienced rider, you might be right. But think back to the time before you started riding motorcycles and you had a tiny little baby motorcycle brain. Say that really fast. You needed the experience that you've gained to let that motorcycle brain grow. New riders are riders thinking about getting into motorcycle adventuring. Sometimes aren't sure yet on how to do this and they need it highlighted until their moto brains grow as big as yours. Okay, that sounded like I was saying that experienced riders have big moto egos. That's not really what I meant, but my point here is sometimes it's helpful for newer riders and inexperienced riders to point out the obvious. I became a motorcycle adventurer because I was already an adventurer who was moto curious, and I fell in love with riding along the way. I imagine there are other future riders like that here watching this video today. Knowing the type of terrain you'll be riding impacts everything from the type of bike you'll have and even your budget. I firmly believe that any bike can be used to create a great moto adventure. But maybe a dual sport bike with knobby tires would be a better option riding off-road in the desert of the Southwest than a Sportster. I've never done that. Get out of the van though. Knowing your terrain also impacts your access to amenities. If you don't like to camp or you need fancy hotels, maybe riding off-road on a backcountry discovery route is not the best option for you. If you stick to the road, you have some really great options from super fancy hotels to some great remote camping spots. My advice is to be open to both. When I first started riding, I was discovering what I really love about riding a motorcycle. I cover what I love about motorcycling in another video. Check out the cards in this video if you're interested in watching that at all. For me, part of my love of motorcycling is getting away from the crazy of daily life and watching my stress melt away with every passing mile. That means riding off-road in remote areas, or at least taking the long way on the back roads. That's where you'll have the most fun and meet the most welcoming people, even if they don't ride. Choosing where you want to ride could be a whole video on itself. In fact, each one of these tips I cover here could be. But let's keep this one short and move on to the next one. So you've chosen where you want to ride, and that's helped you choose the type of bike you want to ride. Now it's time to get the bike ready for the ride. There's nothing worse, absolutely nothing worse, than having the adventure end early. Things can happen along the way to end your trip early. But if it's because your bike isn't in proper shape for the journey, it can be classified under if I only did this before I left type of situation. Things to do and check include change the oil and filter, check the air and fuel filters, check all fluid levels, adjust the throttle and brake cable. If you have a chain, adjust and lube it, check tire pressure and the tread. Check all gauges, lights, horns, and signals. And finally, visually inspect the entire bike for any worn or broken parts. If you're not a wrencher or not comfortable doing these things yourself, head to your local motorcycle shop and tell them what you're planning and insist on a full inspection. With that said, I feel wrenching on your bike is a great way to get to know it better. And that knowledge helps you if something goes wrong on your adventure. We'll talk more about this when we cover toolkits in another video. I've also found that learning how to do something you've never done before can greatly boost your confidence confidence. But you're watching a video on how to plan for a motorcycle adventure, so you already knew that. The next step is to plan your route. This seems fairly obvious to mention this, but how you do it will impact the entirety of your trip. Setting points A and B is the easy part. It will help you plan the total mileage for the trip, give you a sense of the terrain you'll cover, make it possible for you to determine how many days you'll need for the trip, and really help you with some packing decisions. It may seem overly obvious to point out this part of the process, but it's the bedrock of everything else you'll need to prepare. So now you know where you're going, but you need to know how to get there. This is a much more engaged process than planning a trip if you're in a car. In a car, you're likely going to want to take the fastest way possible. It's not the way I would recommend if you're on a bike, because hours on an interstate can be mind-numbing. Instead, plan your motorcycle route connecting smaller highways and back roads to get to the finish line. These roads are what I like to call the blue roads. Some of us of a certain age who used to use maps to guide us, these roads were the blue roads on those maps. Blue roads are likely to have less traffic, more curves, and a lot better scenery along the way. When planning, also use the time of year and the likely weather conditions as your guide. If you're going to be crossing some mountain passes, early spring or late autumn may not be the best time. Those passes might be closed, and even if they're open, you might get caught in a snowstorm. If you've never been on a particular road before, check out Google Maps. Google has photographed much of the world by now, and you have access to a ton of paved and non-paved roads. Take a peek at the road conditions, the amount of traffic you can see in the photographs, distance between fuel stops, and some potential places to stop for the day. I'll have more on this later. It's also a great idea to get your miles per gallon figured out before you go. This way you'll know how far out you can venture before you'll need to fill up again. When I was on an adventure in 2018, I didn't plan well while in elevation in New Mexico. I was in a remote area and it was starting to get dark, and there was only one seasonal hotel that was closed when I approached it. I was at 11,000 feet and the temperature was dropping and it was getting darker, and I was afraid I wasn't gonna be able to find a place to sleep that night. A few miles away, I found a state park with some availability and some super friendly staff. After setting up camp and warming up next to my campfire, I thought about how lucky I was to find this place. Well, you'll find getting lucky like this is one of the great pleasures of riding motorcycles long distance. Sooner or later though, your luck will run out. The biggest mistake that every motorcycle adventurer makes, new or experienced, is they pack too much. You don't need to overload your bike with all the comforts of home. Instead, determine what you absolutely need. Maybe you don't need a whole week's worth of clothes or an electric coffee grinder. Well, some of us might. Also, let your route plan dictate what's important for you to take. If you're camping along the way, there are a lot more elements to consider than if you're booked up at hotels every night. A few things you might want to consider are those that cover your ass in a worst case scenario type of situation. Some rain gear can easily be tucked away and will be a lifesaver if you're caught in a rainstorm. A small tire repair kit can be a huge lifesaver too. If you're stuck on the side of the road, you can quickly and easily fix it. And also something to pump up that tire. I can't tell you how many times I've been saved by zip ties. Zip ties are enormously helpful. Pack a bunch so they'll be there when you need them. Also, a small tool roll with tools specific for your bike will be enormously helpful. And if you do find yourself on the side of the road, you might be there for a while, so a couple bottles of water and some snacks. Having those there at all times is helpful. These are things that take up valuable space but may not be used at all. But they are the things you wish you brought when things go south on the road. Sometimes the best roads are the most unexpected. And on a long adventure, expect to experience the unexpected. That's why I love get lost rides. These are where you just start riding, don't have a plan in mind. Ride until you have no idea where you are, and ride until you find your way back. Don't get me wrong, I love all the riding apps that we have out there, but one of the joys of riding for me is using my brain in ways other road users don't. Getting lost, exploring, and finding my own way back does just that. With all this said, it's important to be open to change on a long adventure. Route maps, safety measures, and packing plans are all well and good, but you're likely to see things out on the road you didn't expect, some areas that interest you that you want to explore, or you may just want to spend a day doing a get lost ride in the middle of nowhere. My 28-day Route 66 trip went according to plan only on the first 4 days. The other 24 days, my trip was off course and loosely planned. If it doesn't leave you without gas or take you into some hazardous situation, go for it. A trip plan may quash the romanticism of just simply heading out into roads unknown, but it's truly not a death sentence for adventure. Just be safe, smart, and enjoy this ridiculously fun motorcycling lifestyle we've all become part of. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.